This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. We'll be remembering Matt Beard and the legacy he leaves behind on the pod today. The football seems largely irrelevant given the news we had over the weekend, but we will cast our eye over the games and reflect on all the fantastic tributes. Aitana Bonmati reigns supreme, winning the Ballon d'Or for a third time. We'll give you our thoughts on that. And we'll be speaking to Mercury13 co-founder Victoire Cogevina Reynal as the group announced they're now majority shareholders at Bristol City Women. All that, plus we'll take your questions, and that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. What a panel we have today. Suzy Wrack, happy birthday to you, belated.
Happy birthday to me, yeah. Nice weekend off, apart from obviously the horrific news.
Yes, absolutely. Tom, we'll discuss that in a second, but how are you?
I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, in the midst of NCT classes, learning all about how to change nappies and learning a lot, I think. So, yeah, it's been a really tough weekend for sure. But no, I thank you to Suzy's just given me some very helpful advice about baby poo. So we can take that onwards with happiness in the course of the week.
I feel awful that we're actually talking about that right at the top of the pod, but we did spend about 15 minutes because Ted, my little boy, came in and said, "Mummy, I need a poo," just before we were about to start recording, which has then meant that we've just been talking about that for the last 10 minutes. Sophie Downey, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Just recovering from a weekend in the Northwest, as Tom said, a very tough weekend. So long journey up, long journey back, but it was a good weekend.
Yeah, it has been a really tough weekend, and that is where we're going to start. There is nowhere else to start, really. The women's football world shocked on Saturday evening to learn the devastating news that Matt Beard had passed away at the age of 47. Our thoughts, obviously, with his wife Debbie, children, family and close friends as well. We all knew him, and anybody who worked with him knew him affectionately as Beardy. He was a stalwart of the sport as well, hugely successful on the field, widely loved, respected off of it. In terms of his career, if you didn't know, he started off at Millwall, went on to manage Chelsea in the pre-Emma Hayes era, went to Liverpool twice, Boston Breakers as well, West Ham, Bristol City, and most recently Burnley. He brought unprecedented success to Liverpool during his first spell at the club. They had back-to-back WSL titles, and he went back there in 2021, leading them back into the top flight, winning the championship in his first season. And if you remember as well, against all odds, he led both Chelsea and West Ham to the FA Cup finals. But it's perhaps his work behind the scenes where he had the biggest impact. You just need to look at the tributes posted all over social media and at various points in broadcasts, etc. this weekend to understand the lasting impact that he had on so many people, how many careers that he helped, how much he genuinely cared about the women's game and how much he genuinely cared about those who work within it. It was just such tough news to get, Suzy.
Yeah, really shocking news. Nothing anyone expected to hear, and it really, really, really difficult to hear because so many knew him. And I think, the outpouring on social media has shown the depth of feeling towards him as a person and a manager, how utterly adored he was. And yeah, all of our interactions with him, as journalists, for me have been nothing but brilliant. I always really admired the way he handled speaking to the press after defeats, and particularly really heavy defeats, because there was always this real honest humbleness and weariness at a lack of resources and having to battle with so little, which was so often the case for him and his teams. And, I was really lucky in that when he was at West Ham, I got invited. He agreed that I could come and watch an entire behind closed doors training session with just me sat there in the stands ahead of the game I was covering, which was their game, like complete access to all their tactical insight, watching him on the training pitch, like right in the middle of things, literally placing players, taking players by the shoulders and moving them into the position he wanted them to be in, and then talking through it, and obviously being really loud and vocal, but like a real, like, there's a lot made of his character as a people person and someone who was really, really good at understanding players and getting the best out of them in that sense, and of recruiting really well. But like his tactical brain was phenomenal too. And yeah, it's just devastating news. I'm really glad to see the crowdfunder to raise money for his funeral and for his family moving forward has like done so well, and again speaks to like the depth of feeling around him.
Yeah, one thing you said actually there, Susie, reminds me of a moment, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, and his team had just had quite a bad defeat. And one of the staff members sort of was talking to me and said, "Oh, I hope you're going to be kind in your match report." And Beattie just jumped in and was like, "No, we were crap. You need to say we were crap. It's about like driving the standards and stuff." And I mentioned that because he really had a lot of respect for this profession and the media, and he had a lot of time for all of us who worked in the media. And that's really important to say. He really, going way back, going all the way back to the early years before WSL, and in those early WSL years with journalists who covered his teams then, I remember they saying the same thing. And look, on a personal level, this still doesn't really feel real. The last time we spoke earlier this month, we were making plans for a beer, which has not happened. But it doesn't really feel like it's true yet. But obviously, the kind of shock and sadness that we're feeling will be nothing in comparison to his family. So our love and all goes out to them, and I hope they are heartened by the tributes that have been flooding in from all over the world of women's football. And I think what people I've spoken to in the last couple of days, it's noticeable how even if you didn't play for him, you appeared to really love him. But those who did play for him frequently wanted to sign for his next clubs again. There are so many examples of players who followed him from club to club and wanted to carry on playing under him because they saw him as like a big brother. And that kind of tells you everything you need to know about how well he was thought of with his players. So he'll be dearly, dearly missed. And on a football level, if I could just add a few bits and bobs, it's really worth remembering how many clubs he helped transform. Faye mentioned this at the start, but that was Chelsea's first cup final, which if you think about that now, that's sort of hard to imagine, right? But Chelsea, he took them to their first cup final. West Ham, he took them to their first cup final. And realistically, since then, they've never had such a good day as that. And obviously, Liverpool will be where he'll be most sorely missed, not only a two-time WSL winner and winning them promotion back up to the WSL, but somebody who gave a lot of time to the supporters, was always keen to meet them for a drink down the pub, and I think will be remembered for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, I'm not going to rehash what Tom and Susie have said because they've said it so well. But I guess just more maybe on a personal note, I've known Matt on and off for the last 13 years of my life, bumping into him at football grounds here and there, interviewing him post-match. He was very, very supportive of our journey, mine and Rachel's, with Girls on the Ball. He would always check in when he saw us, always give us a hug, or all right, Soph, all right, Rach. And to think that that's not going to be there anymore is kind of hard. I think it's testament to him as well that I just will think about that press conference at Man United for a long time on Sunday. It was a very emotional press conference with Mark Skinner, and I think that just shows how much he impacted not just the people he worked with day to day, but the people who came across him every weekend, covering us in media and stuff like that. And there was a lot of emotion. I would shout out Mark Skinner as well, because he made sure that we were all okay afterwards. He came around and gave us all a big hug, and I think that's a testament to him as well. But yeah, it's a very, very sad weekend, and yeah, it doesn't feel real. So
Just Sophie mentioning that game there reminds me of just the immense respect that I think we all have for Scott Rogers and Joe Potts, who obviously worked under Beardy and were there in front of the cameras as staff members at Man United, obviously really, really finding that tough. And the same to Olivia Smith and Taylor Hines, who played, and it must have been such emotional circumstances. And I think to all four of them and everyone else who, carried on with so professionally amid such grief, I think that will always stick with me, and how strong they were to go through on Sunday and play and work in such a professional way. Immense respect to them, because that was not an easy day for anybody.
Yeah, and that's exactly what people have said. That's what Matt would have wanted them to do as well. And there were the tributes everywhere across the grounds, as you would expect on Sunday. A moment of silence and applause in the 47th minute while Liverpool's fixture against Aston Villa was postponed at the request of the players, many of whom had obviously played with him for many years, and you couldn't expect them to turn out and play like that. And obviously the football feels really trivial in these kind of circumstances, but there were fixtures on Sunday, and we are going to go through them. And of course, when you think of the legacy that Matt Beard leaves, there's not a club really that he hasn't touched in some way. And we're going to start at Lee because, as Soph said, amazing tributes from Mark Skinner. But Olivia Smith, who you just mentioned, Tom, was brought to England by Matt Beard last season, named in the starting 11 for Arsenal's trip up to Manchester United. Taylor Hines, former Liverpool vice-captain, on the bench. And Renee Slagers spoke about her pride in them as well after the game. Goalless draw is how it ended. Record crowd actually at Lee Sports Village. Really, as you'd maybe expect, Suzy, not that much attacking quality, few clear-cut chances. The defences really came out on top on both, just 4 shots in total in the entire game. What did you make of it?
Yeah, not a great game for me to watch as a fan, being off this weekend as Friday was my birthday. I sat down thinking, great day of football. I'll watch the women's Arsenal game and then I'll watch the men's Arsenal game and we'll all be happy. And both were pretty crap from an Arsenal point of view. But, it is what it is. I think, United have an exceptional defence, are really well organised. I'm not sure I agree with the tactic of starting Stina Blackstenius and Alessia Russo together. Like, I fine to experiment with that. Like, it's not been tried very regularly, so why not give it a go? But I think Arsenal really lost some of their players that really stretched the game off the bench when they started, both Blackstenius and Olivia Smith, and I think that maybe then cost them, because then you then have to take those players off for others instead of having the players that are going to come on and stretch the game. So I think that was maybe something that they'll reflect on a little bit. Story of resilient defence is ultimately it, but a pretty boring game for someone to sit at home and watch.
Yeah, Renee Slager's odd decision according to Suzy, Soph, but also maybe an odd decision for Mark Skinner as well. Elizabeth Turland scored a hat-trick in midweek, but Mark Skinner opted for Melvin Mallard instead. What should you make of that?
Yeah, I think he wanted to try and attack the spaces behind Arsenal's defence and try and hit them with her speed. She's obviously in good form as well at the moment, but it was a surprise because of the kind of form that Elizabeth Turland had showed. She was so good in that game against SK Brann. So it was a bit of surprise in that respect. I do think Mark Skinner kind of called Renee Slager's bluff. I just remember the post-match against SK Brann, and he literally said, Renee Slegers is going to start with Stina Blackstenius. She always starts with Stina Blackstenius up front against us, and she did. So I think they were very prepared for it in that respect. They were both looking to get in behind the defences. Both defences managed it pretty well. Big shout out to Katie Reid as well, who was phenomenal in the back line, as was Letizia down the other end. So I think that was the story of the day, but there wasn't great quality of a game, to be honest. I know the defending was good, but in terms of like the attacking product, you would have probably expected a little bit more.
Yeah, Elizabeth Turland had done her job midweek because United actually came into this fixture on the back of a history-making week, reaching the Champions League for the first time after beating SK Brann 3-0 in qualifying, Tom. Massive moment for the club and for Mark Skinner as well. Well, what could this kind of confidence boost do for their season?
Yeah, a history moment for the club, and I think really crucial to their season. I think if they hadn't qualified for the group stage, there would have been that underlying tone of disappointment throughout everything else that had come afterwards, no matter what they'd achieved. So it's a big step for them, and I think our worries will still remain, though, about whether they have the depth on the bench to contend with the extra matches. They're going to rotate clearly between Turland and Mallard, which in attack is a great option to have. But we're already starting to see some of the thin areas. I thought Céline Bizet did very well actually against Arsenal, covering at right back. That was a very good performance from her, against such good Arsenal wingers to help them keep a clean sheet. But that's clearly not the ideal situation that you would want to have as your backup at right back going into a Champions League campaign. But it's important to be positive in this answer because they did play very well against Brighton. They thoroughly deserved to go through. And I think they're certainly the danger team in that third pot of teams, for sure. And all the teams who have drawn to play against Manchester United have a difficult draw because they certainly do not have a gimme from their pot 3 opponent. So I think they'll cause a few problems for lots of teams in the Champions League. I'm looking forward to seeing how they get on.
Yeah, me too. Manchester City travelled to London. It was a comfortable 5-1 victory over Tottenham Hotspur, who perhaps came a bit more down to earth with a bump. It was a scare, though, in the first half. Lauren Hemp forced off with an ankle injury. Despite that, though, a dominant attacking performance from City, which just shows their depth, really, doesn't it, Suzy?
Yeah, it really does, which, is a pleasure to see after a year of them struggling with like severe injuries and things like that. Real positive start, some lovely play, dominant. I think this is the sort of performance we expect for them when they've got their players fit, and it's good to see it back that way.
Martin Ho looked pretty frustrated, Tom, I have to say. His side's defence just collapsed a little bit, didn't they? Is there cause for concern? Should they go back to the drawing board, or is this just, a little hiccup?
There'll be defensive issues that they'll want to address for sure. That is a concern, but I wouldn't say big panic. They performed very well in the 2 games they would have targeted winning out of those first 3 fixtures, kept clean sheets in those and played very well at Everton. So that there were going to be teething problems. It's still a very early days, and they've also really still not got the squad to challenge for a top sort of 4 spot. So I don't think they should overreact to the defeat, and they've won the games that they'll be judged more on. So I don't want to be too critical. It was a poor performance, but if you'd offer them 6 points from their first 3 matches, I think they would have snapped your arm off. So they've done well.
It's the same with London City's first 2 games, right? They're not the games that are going to define any of the team outside the top 3 or 4 season, right? London City come off the back of that and get the win against Everton. There's going to be bad results against the top 3. They're that far ahead. And 5-1 to City is going to hurt, but it's never going to be the result that defines their season. I think you can get your head down about a defeat, a close defeat to someone sort of in and around where you are, more than you would necessarily in a game like this, despite the fact that the result is so frustrating and big, because the gap is so big for me.
Well, you mentioned London City Lionesses. Soph was at Goodison Park on Friday for their first win in the WSL, 2-1 victory over Everton. Isabel Goodwin scoring a brace. Yuka Mamiki pulled one back from the spot to make it a nervy finish in the end. But how impressed were you, Soph, with London City's performance and what's happening at Everton?
I think it's both sides just taking a bit of time to come together. I think London City did really well on the night. They started really well. They've got Isabel Goodwin up and firing, and we all know what kind of talent she is in terms of what she can do. And it was only a matter of time before she opened her account in the Barclays WSL. She is such a good young talent, and I'm so excited for her to come through the England ranks as well. Just completely instinctive, but got so many different aspects of her game. She can play out wide, she can play up front, and she really leads that line, and she's played every single minute for London City so far. That kind of shows what she's all about. I think Jocelyn Pressure was very much about finding the right pieces, and it's going to take him time to get things working, get things cohesive. So it's a matter of just time for them. I think the same could be said for Everton. Brian Sorensen's had 9 new signings as well. He's still figuring out everything about it. They probably, I think Tom said in the post-match press conference, if there'd been 10 minutes longer, I think Everton probably would have found the equaliser. They were on the ascendancy in that final 20 minutes of the game. They performed really, really well. They just couldn't find the back of the net. But I think for Brian Sorensen, the worry will be the slow starts. they keep making slow starts, they keep being on the back foot and having to claw themselves back into games and sometimes leaving it too late. So I think for both, it's just a figuring out process. I'm not too worried about, like, for Everton. I think it will come good. You can see the signs there. And I think London City will continue to build.
Brighton building as well, their first win of the season too, beating West Ham by 4-1. It was a real clinical attacking display actually from Brighton, Suzy. 4 different goal scorers, which they'll be pleased with. Is this where they lift off?
Yeah, I think so. I think things are starting to click. It was great to see Rosa Kafaji on the score sheet after making her first start for the side. Like, obviously, difficult season last year, on the bench for Arsenal for most of the season, coming on very, very occasionally. So it's nice to see her sort of start to get some game time in the WSL and build up that experience and things. Thought Michelle Adjaman, while she's still not got a goal, was a real handful, causing all kinds of problems and forcing errors that led to some of the goals, including Kafaji's. And I also thought Fran Kirby was an absolute menace and absolutely everywhere. And it's quite wonderful to see a player who, is surely at some point coming to the end of her career, roll back the years and be as good as she was, sort of 5-10 years ago even. And a real impressive performance. So to have 4 different goal scorers, and such a comfortable victory, and so many players sort of stepping up and seeming so cohesive, I think they'll be really, really happy with that.
Vivian Asai had made it 2-1 on 51 minutes, Tom, but ultimately, again, they capitulated. West Ham, they're bottom of the table without a point yet. Are they panicking, do you think? What's going through Rhiannon Skinner's head at the minute?
There's still a lot of time. I really don't think they should be panicking, but the worry I would have is how vulnerable they look defensively. I don't think I was alone in thinking that they would be really exciting to watch this season going forward, and that hasn't really come to fruition yet either. I think I will hold judgment until we've seen them have a couple more opportunities, but it's the back line looking so leaky. That would be my concern for West Ham.
Well, listen, can I just say that nobody reserved judgment on Leicester at the beginning of the season. I think everybody tipped them to go down. And actually, although it was a defeat to Chelsea, it was a very narrow defeat, just the 1 goal. And I think everybody would have expected this game to have ended in Chelsea's attacking line having great fun. As it was just Aggie Beever-Jones on the score sheet in the 7th minute. What did you make of it, Soph?
I think Leicester, as Tom's said, have got their defence figured out. I think they are very hard to break down. They're so resilient. They work really hard for each other. They know how to pack the box as well, which makes it hard for any shots to come off. You would, as you said, expect Chelsea to come out on top. I think it just shows the work that Leicester have done over the last year in terms of the off-the-ball stuff that doesn't often get praised, the out-of-possession stuff. They regularly, they registered something like 46% possession in this game, which is crazy for them when they averaged 36% possession the whole of last season. That's actually one of their highest possession stats. So the fact that they came to Kings Meadow and did that, I think, is impressive. I think for Leicester, for me, it's about, finding the right personnel up front. If you're going to play that out of possession game where you're looking to hit people on the counter, yes, it's great to have the speed of the wingers that they have, but they do need a target player. And I think, positive signs for them. I think they are better than I thought they would be. For Chelsea, I think it's a question of things clicking together. Sonia has said they're adjusting things, they're working things out still. I think that's the case. They've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces of the puzzle, a lot of stars to fit into that lineup. Their one constant at the moment seems to be Aggie Beever-Jones, who is doing the business up front. She is really making herself undroppable, 3 goals and 3. So, I think interesting game for both. Leicester so nearly equalised in the injury time they hit the bar, and that would have been quite something. But it was a brilliant save from Hannah Hampton.
Yeah, and we'll discuss Hannah Hampton in a second. That's it for part 1. In part 2, we'll reflect on the winners of the Ballon d'Or. I've just given you a spoiler there, haven't I? And have a chat with Mercury13’s Victoire Cogevina Reynal. welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. So last night, the 2025 Ballon d'Or award ceremony took place in Paris, and it was a shock, actually. Aitana Bonmatí picked up the main award for the third year in a row. She faced stiff competition from the likes of Mariona Caldente and Alessia Russo. Talk to me, people, because I was very surprised by the result and a little bit disappointed, actually. Suzy?
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit ridiculous that she's won it, and that's no disrespect to Bonmatí. I think she is one of the best players to have ever played the game, and will go down in history as one of the best to have ever played. She's superb to watch. I love watching her. I do not think last season was her best season. It was a phenomenal season in comparison to most players, but it wasn't her best season, and others had better seasons, including other players who played for me for Spain and Barcelona, including Patrick Guerrero, even Alexia, particularly for Barcelona last season, I would say had a better season. Mariona Caldente for Spain, obviously arriving in England, winning Player of the Year in the first season in a new country, and then going on to win the Champions League with a new team against the team that she left. Those alone, I think, were worthy of winning. And then you've got Alessia Russo, who had a phenomenal season, who scored in the final of the Euros, who won the Champions League and the Euros, who was incredibly influential in the quarter-final of the Champions League against Real Madrid, when Arsenal had to come from 2 goals behind in the first leg to win 3-0 in the second leg. She scored 2 of those goals, hugely influential for England, particularly her hold-up play and stuff during the tournament. So, for me, it just felt a little bit disappointing, well, actually very disappointing, to not see some of those achievements recognised ahead of Aitana's last season, who I think, by her own admission, would say it was not her best campaign. So, we know why these things happen. I think the fact that they have a very similar way of doing the judging to the men's tournament, except instead of 100 judges, it's 50, one each from the top 50 ranked UEFA nations. It's a journalist. Now, whilst on the men's side, you could have 100 journalists from the top 100 ranked nations, and there will be dedicated football journalists in every single country. For the women's, there won't be. And so there's a real, I would say, knowledge gap between, say, the journalists from England or the US or Canada or France or Spain, where there are people who regularly follow the women's game, versus some of those nations towards the bottom of that 50 UEFA ranking of countries who, aren't afforded the wonderful privilege that we are in being able to work in this game full time and watch it as religiously as we do. And so I think there's a gap there where it doesn't really, when you take the system for the men's and you put it on the women's, and it doesn't really align or work properly, and that's an issue for me.
Yeah, a few issues, but let's do the celebration, shall we? Because plenty of Lionesses representation. Serena Wiegmann receiving the Johan Cruyff Trophy, which is for Manager of the Year. Hannah Hampton winning Goalkeeper of the Year, and Arsenal winning Club of the Year. Were they expected for you, Tom?
I think those were all fair and well deserved, actually. And I think Hampton, fully deserved that with the way she performed in the clutch moments for the Euros, which at the end of the day, these events are really judged on the major tournaments, I guess. But that's also my big concern with this whole awards night, was just how little recognition there was for the fact there was a WAFCON, there was a Women's Copa America, and did they really know? Did the people organising this event really realise that had happened? I mean, all of the top 10 play their football in Europe, and I guess I feel a bit of sympathy for anyone who played for Brazil or Nigeria who was watching that last night thinking, hello, we played really well as well. There's a bit of a danger that this event just becomes Europe focused. They're still not quite realising that equal should mean equal, really. So hopefully that will change in the future.
And Eva Payeur picked up the Gerd Müller Trophy, which is for Striker of the Year. And now the Champions League draw was made on Friday. As we know, Manchester United are now in it after qualification finished last week. It's going to be a really busy league phase. 3 English teams involved. So champions Arsenal are going to face Lyon, Real Madrid and FC Twente at home. And Bayern Munich, Benfica and Leuven away. Chelsea come up against 2 of their old rivals, meeting Barcelona at home and Wolfsburg away. away. They're also going to face AS Roma and Paris FC at Stamford Bridge and travel to St Polten and FC Twente. Finally, Manchester United face a tough inaugural campaign. They're going to host Lyon, PSG and Vålerenga at Lee Sports Village, and Wolfsburg, Juventus and Atletico Madrid on the road. Right, we're going to say goodbye to Tom and to Soph, actually, because we've got a really fascinating interview coming up. Not that you two aren't fascinating, obviously, but me and Suzy are going to be speaking to Victoire Cogevina Reynal. So, Tom, Garry, I think with your little boy imminently arriving into the world in the next few weeks, Suzy and I have terrified you with the bodily functions you are going to have to be dealing with when he arrives. So have a good week.
Thank you. I'm off to buy some nappies. Take care.
Excellent. Soph, always lovely to see you.
Great to see you too. Thank you.
Right, there was some big news last week as multi-club ownership group Mercury13 announced they'd acquired a majority stake in Barclays WSL 2 side Bristol City. So we thought we'd catch up with the group's co-founder, Victoire Cogevina Reynal, to find out a bit more about the deal and what we can expect for the future of the club. Congratulations, first of all, Victoire. When you get these kind of deals over the line, I know how exciting that can be. Huge news. How are you feeling?
Good, great. I think as a team, we've been working really hard in the background to get this done on both sides, both Bristol and ourselves. And so now that it's finally done and the ink is drying over the contract, we're starting to focus on the future and what's to come.
Obviously, myself and Suzy know everything about Mercury13, but for anyone listening who perhaps doesn't know what the group does and what you do personally, can you just explain a little bit more about it? Because you're not the traditional, you don't have the traditional ownership model, do you?
Well, I am not the traditional owner of a football club, am I? I'm a Latin woman with tattoos that is 34 years old. I don't think a lot of people would expect me to own a football club. But we were born 2 years ago in August of 23 with a mission to bring football to the other half of the world. So for us, we would do that by investing and operating women's football clubs, and we would focus on this 24/7. So we don't invest in other sports and we don't invest on the men's side of the sport. And 4 months after inception, we had acquired our first team, which is FC Como Women, playing in the Serie A Femminile, which is the top division of Italian professional football, and started really applying essentially what we call our transformation playbook. So how we were going to get this team that is an independent women's team to be able to compete against the Juventus and the Romas of this world when everything was completely under invested in a way. And so we started a wonderful journey with that team and a lot to share on that front. But it was very much the beginning of what we believe is going to be a model that we can replicate across many leagues, across many clubs, and hopefully across many continents. And Bristol City is our second club in that quest.
I think it's great that you've taken your time to sort of kind of get an understanding of things at Como before you've then moved on to your next club. You've been looking to enter the English market for a while. Like, why Bristol City? What made you choose Bristol as the team to invest in?
We hadn't made it a secret that we wanted to be in the WSL. We believe that this is going to become the best league in the world for professional club football for women. And we wanted to make sure that we had the right asset in this market. We have a cost opportunity as part of kind of the business that we operate in, that if we invest in one team, that we can't really invest in any others. So we had to make this choice very carefully. Our wonderful Chief Strategy Officer, Hannah Haynes, took on the challenge of mapping the top 3 divisions in the country and really understanding what was available, what was also open for a new structure, because for us, control and operational and commercial control was very important. We weren't going to take a minority stake, and that obviously made kind of the pool quite smaller in that sense. It was an unprecedented deals, and so we had to make sure that we did our research. And Bristol, I think, was very clearly at the top of that list from the beginning. This is a deal that took 16 months from beginning to end. And it really ticked every single one of our boxes, from the incredible infrastructure that it has in Ashton Gate, in the Robbins High Performance Center, in the tier 1 academy that has already produced international talent, all the way to the fact that from a commercial standpoint, this club represents the southwest of England, which we believe is very much a sleeping giant in terms of fandom. So when you look at all of that put together, and of course a partner on the other side, which was the Lansdowne family, open to really figure out the structure that would make sense, all we had to do was find a way to get it done.
Obviously, the fans are going to want to know what it means for them and what it means for the club's future as well. So how involved are you going to be with the day-to-day running of the club, and where do you want to take Bristol City? What's the aim?
So we'll start with the easy piece. I think that Bristol City always belonged to the WSL, to the top division in this country, and right now that's what we're focused on. We want to have that promotion. Football is football. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we're surely investing and ensuring that we give the team the best chances. And then after that, I think that the sky was never the limit, is our tagline at Mercury13. There's a lot that we can do. We were very involved with Como because we're not just investors. We're very active operators in the business. So we're now working on the long-term plan and making sure that there's a strategy in place to make this club not only the best performing team on the pitch, but also the most followed club in the country.
You know, a lot of people outside who don't work within football, some people who do work within football, are actually worried about conflicts of interest. How do you respond to that? What's your opinion on that, and how do you allay people's fears?
Well, look, this company was launched by convincing a lot of people that the MCO model was one that actually is much better suited for women than it was ever for men. And it all starts by the premise that women's teams are completely under-resourced by every single metric that you can measure. And so if you have a group that can give resources at a much higher level to those clubs, then you're giving them a much better chance to succeed. And that can be everything from the commercial standpoint. You know, we have world-class talent that's looking after these teams that a team like Como could never be able to afford. But because they're at the group level and we're sharing that resource across multiple groups, now they have access to this. Same on the marketing front. The case can also be made on HR and recruiting and the performance side, the football side of things. So for us, it's really about demonstrating how the MCO actually, in this particular case, and at the maturity in which the women's game is at, can actually accelerate its growth exponentially in comparison to any other model. Of course, we're at the beginning of that journey. Now that we do have 2 clubs in the portfolio, we're going to start demonstrating this, but it's always been the thesis that we've had and the one that, our investors have come and backed as well.
Obviously, you mentioned the severe underfunding of women's football and in investment in women's football teams there. Where do you see the biggest potential for growth moving forward?
The audience. I think that is where we all need to be focusing, because that is a long-term answer to any problems that we've had. If we have an audience, if we have fans coming into the stadiums, watching the games over the weekend, following our athletes, buying our merchandising, then these teams are going to be able to exist independently and with autonomy. And that, at the end of the day, is all we need to do. If we continue to propagate the problem by now making these teams dependent on investors, then what's the point of everything we're doing? Women are going to stadiums because they feel like they're actually standing up for themselves and asking for something much bigger for themselves. And that is, whether you're a fan or a player on the pitch, we're all united in this. And if we don't actually translate it into culture and we're not able to articulate this, then I think we're missing the point of women's football at large.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's almost like creating a subculture to begin with, and then expanding it out as people get on board and feel like they belong. It's really fascinating that the work that you're doing, and I've followed what Mercury13 are doing from afar for quite a while now, and I expect you have a strategy beyond what's going on with Bristol City at the moment. So the club portfolio is now 2. The big question is, what is the aim for the future? Are you going to invest in any more clubs?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's always been part of what we said we were going to do. But I think what most people don't realize is that this deal take a long time. These clubs are not built to receive investment. They were never structurally ready for this. It has happened so fast over the last 2 years, and suddenly all these clubs are trying to understand how can they bring in a partner like us and make it make sense with the rest of the club. So it's going to take a little bit more time, but we're certainly doing that. We've made it no secret that Europe is our priority market in terms of finding the right assets in the top 5 leagues here. And then, whatever else we can do, we will be looking into it. And there's so much more. I mean, we're very much at the beginning of something huge. There's continents like Latin America and Africa that I think are going to play a huge role in the talent piece. And, we'll be remiss not to be looking at opportunities over there as well.
Take business out of it. What do you love most about women's football here in the UK?
The resilience. I think it's when you know the history and you know what has happened to the sport in this country, and you see the comebacks of all comebacks, right? This is really it, with the Lionesses bringing it home before their men's team, and how that has then bled across the entire culture. The fact that football is such a huge part of society, but for whatever reason has never included women, which is literally the other half of this country. And now you're seeing this opportunity to do it. I think that's what's the most exciting bit. Every time I go to any women's football match here in the UK, whether it's in London or anywhere around the country, and you see people that have been going to these matches and supporting these athletes for so long, and now they're finally getting the attention, the resources that they deserve. I think we're at the beginning of something very, very special, and it's an honor to be able to write a small part of that story.
It's been a real honour to talk to you, Victoire. It's been brilliant hearing what your plans are for the future, how you're going to look after Bristol City as well, and we hope that you'll come on the Guardian Women's Football Weekly again.
Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we'll have more to share with you soon.
Look forward to it. Suzy, I know that, you have concerns about multi-club ownership, but when you hear from someone like Victoire and what's going on at Mercury13 and the impact that they're able to make on clubs, especially when we think about Bristol City and the journey that they've been on, what are your thoughts?
The women's game is a bit of a sort of a crossroads about the direction it takes and how this growth looks moving forward. And, anyone listening to Victoire and seeing what they're doing, or Michelle Kang, and sort of seeing the intention behind what they're doing is going to welcome that into women's football. But it's, I think it's important that we ask those questions and we, quiz what we want women's football to be moving forward, where we want profits to go, what we want investment in it to look like, and that kind of thing. I think they're all really important conversations to be having around these topics.
By the sounds of it, they welcome that as well, and work more as a collaborative. It's going to be fascinating going forward. Suzy, always fascinating to be in your company, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed we'll actually see each other face to face sometime soon.
It would be really lovely. I owe you a birthday drink.
I'll take it.
Excellent. Keep having your say. Let us know your thoughts actually on that interview and anything else that you've heard in the pod today. You can send in your questions via X or email us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. As ever as well, a reminder to sign up for our bi-weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalposts, sign up. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Silas Gray. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Danielle Stevens.
This is The Guardian.